podcast. You may have seen Peter on there. We're going to really expand out. So if you missed it, sorry, but you should follow us on the drone log connections every Thursday at 11. By the way, this is I'm seeing there's no sound. I don't know if that's accurate.
Well, the question is there sound now? Fixed.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, so we're fixed. All right. So I'll go back. I think we didn't have sound for the first minute or two, so let's just kind of do the repeat here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome from around the globe back to the Drones at Dawn podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldai, and thanks, Dave, for letting us know we missed some sound there. This June is Advanced Air Mobility Month, and we kicked it off with Felipe Varon for Varon Vehicles. We've got Peter Schmidt here today, and by the way, he was on our special podcast last Tuesday night, Drones at Dusk, with the Urban Low Altitude Transport Association crew. It was amazing. If you missed it, go back and check it out. Today, we're going to focus more on Transcend Air and what Peter is doing with his VI 400 and 400R aircraft. Pretty amazing stuff. And so, welcome everybody, and hello there, California, and Sharon Rossmark, great to see you out there. So it's going to be a ton of fun. Again, this is live, so keep the comments coming. We love to see that. We ask your questions, give us positive encouragement. All good. So without further ado, Peter was on our clubhouse last Thursday. If you missed it, unfortunately, it was not recorded. And if you're not following me on Clubhouse, please do that and join our Drone Log Connections room every Thursday at 11. What we do is we have typically the guest for this podcast the Thursday prior to the podcast. So, for example, this Thursday we're going to have Brian Garrett Glazier from E-VTOLinsights.com. He's going to give us a market deep dive on what's happening, and then he'll be on the podcast next Monday. So check that out. But Peter is the COO and co-founder of Transcend Air. So, Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background first and how you got into advanced air mobility and E-VTOL aircraft and why you formed Transcend?
All right. So I've been an aviation geek since I was 4 years old. And I saw a 2-flight of Delta Daggers climbing out at a 60-degree deck angle, and I've wanted to fly like that ever since. So I went to MIT as an undergrad, started out as a physics major, switched to computer science, then started an entrepreneurial career. Back to MIT and got a master's in management because I wanted to run startups. Did that for about 20 years in high tech. Also got my pilot's license and started flying aerobatics. So I just fly for fun. Then had the opportunity a decade ago to switch career tracks from high tech to aviation aerospace. And I joined a company called Linear Air as its president and COO. Linear Air was the last operator standing of the Eclipse very light jet after the very light jet bubble of the mid-2000s. And I learned a ton in that role at Linear Air about how people actually buy transportation. I went in with a lot of reasonable sounding notions that may sound familiar to people and disproved all of them over the course of 5 years at Linear Air. And that is a huge component of what has gone into us forming Transcend Air. We realized that we wanted to truly transform the passenger experience for people. Airlines have gotten to be pretty depressing experience, and there's a host of interesting psychological and business aspects to that reality. And solving it turns out to have required us to design a VTOL aircraft, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. And so, happy to talk about more details on it. But that's really what all came together for me, was all of those pieces of my background with my co-founder, Greg Bruhl, who's the CEO. And he brings the passenger experience perspective. He wanted a better way to get his 9-year-old mom from her home in New York City up to Boston. Just couldn't put her on the airlines. And So it's interesting that this entire aircraft and business design comes from a desire to create a much better regional travel experience for people. Everything flows from that. We didn't start out as aircraft geeks who wanted to make a cool VTOL aircraft. We started out as business people who wanted to make a really massive, awesome business. And that's how we ended up with the aircraft you see behind me, the Biflower.
So let's talk, let's back up a second. And first of all, I wanted to say two things. Number one, I completely misspoke. So Brian Garrett Glazer was supposed to be on this podcast. He's moved to Joby, and he's not going to be on this podcast. So next week it's actually Jason Pritchard from the UK with E-VTOLinsights.com. So I apologize. It's early, and I am on my first cup of coffee. So, and it's Monday, so I'll just leave it at that. The second thing I wanted to tell everybody, super fun fact. So the picture behind Peter that you see underneath his aircraft, that is one he took, he just told me, when he was doing the aerobatics in his, okay, so pretty cool stuff.
Flying this very aircraft.
Ah, look at that. Very awesome. All right. So show and tell here, very cool. So let's talk about regional air mobility. You mentioned this, and I think a lot of our viewers, I know a lot of our viewers are very plugged into this ecosystem. They probably saw a NASA paper come out maybe in the last month or so. I think it was titled Regional Air Mobility, and it talked about kind of using existing infrastructure, to kind of bolster the VTOL, to have this experience that you're talking about. So let's deep dive a little bit into that, Peter. And you said this was the whole reason why you created Transcend, was this kind of regional mobility idea, and what's the best way to solve this problem. First of all, let's define the problem, right? Because I think we all talk about solutions, but without really appreciating why. You said it's flying on airlines is a terrible experience, and frankly, before COVID it wasn't great. Now post-COVID, it just seems to be even worse. Masks aside, tell us your perspective on the problem that you're trying to solve with Transcend.
So the problem we're trying to solve is to get people, from point A to point B, cost effectively, rapidly, comfortably. And that's not something which is reliably possible with current airline service. The reason that it's evolved that way, like I said, there's kind of a long story behind it. So let me see if I can summarize. Modern air travel is a hostage situation, not a travel modality. And it's how the airlines and the airports and supporting infrastructure make money. So people don't actually care that much about the details of the travel. They travel when they have to, because they have to get to a meeting or a wedding on time. And so what I learned at Linear Air was that with that reality, it's very hard to market aspects of the travel experience to people. Until you have a cost-effective alternative for them, you're not even in the considered set. So there's a lot of hopeful, again, that's one of those notions. I had a notion when I showed up at Linear Air that sounds reasonable, which is if you had a better product, people would pay more for it. And that is true in some markets, but it turns out not to be true in travel. So the problem is, how do you offer a mass market priced travel alternative that isn't a hostage crisis? It doesn't depend on the experience being so miserable, people will shell out $25 just for a slightly larger seat, or $15 in order to avoid the anxiety of, am I going to be able to get my bags in the overhead bin? So I'll pay $15 for early boarding. If you think about it, the service that's been created, the base level service, is anxiety inducing, uncomfortable. It's not good. And that allows the airlines to charge extra for ancillary revenue. So all of these sort of hidden facts that you wouldn't expect to come together in creating this challenge. Now, regional air mobility, you talked about the NASA white paper that just came out. I'm actually having a fight with the authors of that white paper on LinkedIn now. We're polite so far, but the fight is this. This regional air mobility white paper recapitulates the small aircraft transportation system ideas from the late 90s, early 2000s that were critical in creating the very light jet and air taxi phenomenon of the mid 2000s. It is true that there are 5,000 public use airports in the US. They were built as strategic assets around before World War II, when air travel and airplanes were new. And there is an airport like that, typically no more than about 10 or 15 minutes from almost everybody in the country, which sounds like a great resource to activate. The problem is, in order to activate it with aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft that can use the runways, you end up with ticket prices that are just unaffordable for people. They won't pay them. So VTOL doesn't make that better, it makes it worse. VTOL aircraft are always a compromised design versus a pure helicopter or a pure fixed-wing aircraft. And that compromise has to be carefully designed to make sense for a market. And going out to a rural area or a small town or even a smaller city, there's not enough demand there. Demand is thin. So you can't have a frequent enough schedule to fill all the seats for people and have a competitive ticket price. So people are going to drive, and they'll keep driving. Electric doesn't help that much with it for reasons that I can go into in detail. So anyway, the fight I'm picking is the part of regional air mobility where there's enough demand is the part we're targeting, which is city center to city center. It's like Willie Sutton robbing banks. You rob banks because that's where the money are. We're targeting city centers because that's where the people are.
That's kind of what Felipe's doing in a way, because that's the way Colombia and a lot of Latin America is built out in these city centers, right? But his is not so much, actually his is city to city, but also city to regional. And so here's a question for you from someone in the audience, Canaloa. Do you think the airlines are waiting for you to build out your operation and then absorb your services with a buyout or a cease share type option?
Well, we'll see. I think to the extent the airlines have paid any attention to us, they've dismissed us out of hand as, a startup they don't have to think about. They really ought to be thinking about us because we're going to eat their lunch. We are targeting the heart of their most profitable routes. But
and so you said a lot of things there, Peter, and someone else in the audience, I can't quite see the name, so I'm old, but it says when you talked about the problem and the problem statement, totally agree. My last flight was I had to pay extra for like 2 wings, I mean,
it's wing upgrade.
It was Desi Eckstein. Desi's always in here. No, it's so true. I mean, it's almost like, we're going to charge you extra to breathe today. So how are you solving that problem, and what makes your aircraft different from what they're doing in this city-to-city market?
Okay, step 1, no airports. Airports are a big part of the hostage crisis. Worldwide, airports make more money than airlines by a factor of 2. So what I have come to understand is that airline flight that you think you're buying that's the necessity that's forcing you into the system. And the rest of the components of the system have figured out how to extract money from you. So when you buy a low-cost carrier, like a Spirit, they're flying you at a loss. 120% of their profits comes from their frequent flyer program and hotel and rental car referrals. So your ticket is a loss leader to the travel network. Similarly, the airports love the fact that you have to show up early and go through TSA, and it's a miserable experience in the airport because then you go spend money to distract yourself on shopping or restaurants or food. So think about it. Airports are twice as big a business as airlines worldwide.
Wow, I never thought about that, but it makes an abundant amount of sense.
Well, yeah, so how do we solve this problem? Well, first off, we have to do away with airports. They concentrate people in congested ways. You have to wait in line to get your lift or wait for your lift to get into traffic, where you wait to get to the airport, where you wait to get out, where you have to go through TSA security, then you wait to board the aircraft. I mean, it's just wait. Congestion. Even when you're in the aircraft, you're waiting for your runway slot to take off. The aircraft works great, goes fast. Then you land and you wait for your gate. Then you wait to get off. Then you wait for your lift to pick you up.
When they decide to unload them, an hour later.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the effect of concentrating people into a very efficient, once you're concentrated, it's very efficient for the airline operator. And it's very efficient for the airports to extract money from you. Right? That's what this is. It's a way to continue to extract money for you. from you. So that's great. It's been making money. It's also ripe for disruption, which is where we come in. So VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing, lets us operate from the centers of cities from a distributed architecture. I don't want to concentrate all my customers into one place. I want to let them walk down to the end of their street and get on one of our aircraft because we've distributed that transportation resource around the city in useful ways.
Okay.
And then we take off vertically and the wing tilts down. I'm sorry?
So step one was no airports.
Step one is no airport. Step two is taking off vertically.
Okay.
Step three is the wing tilts down and you can go really fast, jet speed. So this aircraft goes over 400 miles an hour. It's 3 times faster than helicopters. That lets us get to another city in a very short amount of time. So it's Boston, New York in 36 minutes. It's London to Paris in 39 minutes. It's San Francisco to San Diego in 1 hour and 20 minutes in the air. And then when you take out all of that congestion, all the waiting at each end, you know, we're cutting travel times by anywhere from 3/4 to over a half. So your door-to-door time from when you leave your office to when you get to your meeting, we can chop 4 hours off. Well, we can chop 3 hours off the New York-Boston trip. In fact, pre-COVID, it really would be 4 hours when congestion was worse.
Yeah, so a couple questions that are relevant to everything you're saying right now. First with Scott Shokman, our super fan, is on here. He's asking, what is your biggest hurdle for building a vertiport?
Well, we're not going to build vertiports the way you see them from Lilium or the Uber Elevate concept or anything, because those are nothing but airports without runways. You're still concentrating everybody in one space.
So, you know, bring me the money, right? Show me the mall experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Take an Uber there, sit in traffic for 1.5 hours to get there.
Right, and then stand in line waiting for your aircraft to be free and take off. And the proponents like to argue that you're going to be able to use an app so you show up just in time to get on your aircraft. And that's one of those reasonable sounding notions that doesn't work in practice, that I can speak to from my linear air experience.
Okay.
There's too much variability because of the congestion in getting you to that aircraft on time. So if you want to guarantee to be there when your aircraft's ready, you're going to show up early. It's what people naturally do. And there you are waiting in line.
Yeah.
So the congestion...
Well, how is it different? Like where are yours going to fly off from if they're not from a Lilium-like vertiport?
Right. So we're going to distribute floating barge-based biports. Actually, they don't really float. You float them in, and then you put down these things called spuds that sink them in, anchor them to the bottom, lift them up a little bit so they don't bob around with the waves. But it's a distributed approach. Here, let me show. Have a little show and tell.
I knew Peter would have some super cool pictures. And while you're doing that, the question, another one from Kanaloa is, are you developing a business relationship with a company that can build a series of these, he said, or she said, VTOL ports, but in your case, biports? Do you have a company already that you're working with on that?
We're talking to a couple. We have not inked deals yet. But that is our goal. We don't want to manufacture, distribute, and maintain these. We want to lease them from somebody who wants to specialize in doing that.
So there you go, business opportunity. Everybody spread the word. Talk to Peter.
Yeah, sorry, I tried to put it up, but it's hidden behind my name.
Okay, it's at the bottom there.
It's at the bottom. Yeah, they're really pretty cool. They're fully self-contained. They've got integrated refueling capabilities, firefighting capabilities. They're very safe. They've got built-in pad heating and walkway heating, so you're not going to slip and fall walking out of the aircraft. And we can build it up incrementally. We don't build one giant building and then have to have 50 aircraft a day operating out of it to make money.
Right.
We can make money with 3 aircraft operating out of it. That's profitable right there. Oh, thanks, Mike.
Mike's trying to
make it a little more visible.
So maybe.
I gotta lean this way. There we go. There it is. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's it. That's rendered at the end of the Boston Fish Pier. And one important thing about our aircraft and this approach is that it is handicapped accessible. It's for mobility challenged people. You can get a wheelchair onto our aircraft.
I love to hear that, Peter, because we talk about accessibility and design, and I just don't know how many people are super hard about that. I love that you designed accessibility into the VI. So that's a great maybe inflection point to talk about the VI a little bit more. You mentioned that it goes 400 miles per hour. There's obviously an image behind you right now. It's So let me just say this: there are people that are very strongly advocating against, you know, VTOL aircrafts and just for the rich and the elite. It's you know undemocratic. It's you know not going to be widely usable by the public, and therefore the government should not be subsidizing or contributing anything to this industry. What's your response to that?
I think they have a point. They have a very good point. The key is the service definition has to enable mass market adoption. The price has to be low enough, the schedule frequent enough, has to be accessible so that everybody can potentially benefit from it. If everybody doesn't benefit, then yes, they're just new helicopters. And helicopters are fine. They really only provide some transportation access for very wealthy people right now. And the reason for that is economic. You can't build a schedule with helicopters in their current trade-offs, engineering trade-offs. You can't build a schedule that would let you offer a competitive ticket price. That was the entire challenge with the VI. I can offer a ticket price between Boston and New York so that the door-to-door cost is less than getting to the airport, an airline ticket, and getting from the airport. So that makes it a mass market product. That mass market opportunity is what's going to open the door for us to convert those people who are concerned about this only being for the elites. The problem with the proposed urban air mobility services is they're hypothetical, and there are a lot of valid critiques of that service model that strongly suggest it will collapse into another helicopter. Like the only way to make money with them will end up being for people who can pay hundreds of dollars or more to go one way to the airport or one way to the suburbs. That is not a mass market product. That is a luxury product for the 1%. And I don't expect many communities want to support that.
So
that's not us.
And I was just going to say, I mean, but looking behind you, I mean, those beautiful, like, they look almost leather, ginormous seats, and,
Yep.
you know, it appears to be a luxury product. So tell me, how have you created the VI to be a mass market product and not be one of these kind of for the elite only type, you know, city-to-city mobility transportation options?
Well, you're right in that what I've got behind me is in fact a VIP interior, because after we started showing the airline version of the aircraft, we started getting inbound requests from well-off people who wanted to own one personally, which is fine. I have no problem with that. And also from the military. So that's drawn us into both those markets. It's not where our heart is, and it's not why we get out of bed in the morning, but we're happy to serve those markets as well. Let me show you what the airline what the airline interior was meant to look like. Yeah, he's having a good phone call.
It looks pretty great.
Well, we hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are leather seats. They're 2 inches wider than first class. Every seat has a built-in cup holder and a little non-stick pad to put your phone on. There's room to put your purse there in the pocket by the door, and we can get everybody's rollerboards inside. These are all key points that come from my operating GA aircraft at this scale, where that wasn't the case.
And chargers, I hope.
Chargers, yes.
I think when I'm on a plane and I'm like, oh my god, am I going to have enough battery even to make my call for an Uber when I get there? You know,
Yep.
Or something.
Yep, that's the key requirement. Absolutely. The comfort, everything comes from this. The accessibility, the comfort of this interior ties together with the speed. I'm going to show. Here's the Xray view of it. So you can sort of see the interior.
Oh yeah, cool. No, that's so you kind of blew through something I want to emphasize. That you mentioned 3 markets now that you're looking to disrupt. One of them is this kind of city-to-city, everyday people transportation model.
Yep.
The second one is the luxury helicopter crowd.
Yep.
That can go for I think it's the VI was the 400R, the kind
R reserved edition. Yeah, R for reserved
edition, which kind of kicks it up a notch, and to use Emerald Lagasse's term, and then the military. So you know that's kind of where my heart has been, obviously, for most of my career. So let's talk about the military for a second, because most people, I think people are starting to appreciate it more, and this is where I try to connect those dots. There are people out there that think the commercial markets and the military markets are completely, stovepiped and disparate, and they're completely symbiotic. And I think the Air Force and the Appworks Agility Prime effort is a perfect example where, they're bringing on these companies, including yours, to look at, I will call it dual-use technologies, something that can work on the battlefield, but then also has kind of a commercial marketability that can be translatable, right, to commercial markets. Otherwise, why are the commercial people? The military doesn't manufacture aircraft. They don't manufacture them. They buy them from people. So they do joint research and development, have somebody else manufacture the product, and then they buy it back. And so tell us how you have recently been involved in Agility Prime, because frankly, Peter, what we're hearing is Joby. Frankly, Beta is doing amazing things. They just got the first E-VTOL DoD aircraft certification that most people don't even know about because they haven't been super visible in what they're doing. Unlike Joby, who has a pretty good marketing machine, probably because they did hire Ryan Garrett Glazer. But so what is Transcend doing with the Air Force?
So we won an R&D contract late last year from Appworks, and that contract was to develop and demonstrate highly autonomous flight, what's called SVO2, Simplified Vehicle Operations Level 2, where we can put a non-pilot operator in the seat. The aircraft will fly itself. The mission we're targeting is personnel rescue. So the aircraft will fly itself out to where there's a downed crewman or somebody else who needs to be picked up and brought to medical attention. The operator has the ability to manipulate the controls. So, for example, if the pre-programmed flight path turns out there's some hostiles along the way, the operator can grab the controls and fly away from that. The aircraft will protect them, keep them from crashing into terrain or obstacles, keep them from upsetting the aircraft while they do that. So we've demonstrated that in simulation as part of this contract. And we're using the unique capabilities of the VI, the performance capabilities, to fly very fast, low to the ground, and hugging the contours of the terrain. It's called nap of the earth flight. It's a way to keep the aircraft from being targeted by hostiles as you go out to complete this rescue mission.
Yeah, so let me jump in too, because my guess is a lot of people here, they don't quite appreciate the importance of this. There's that thing they call the golden hour, which is when there's a down, soldier, sailor, and a Marine on the battlefield that's injured. If you can get that person to medical care, off the battlefield to medical care within 1 hour from that injury, the likelihood of their survival just exponentially increases. And I know they're talking to you with personnel recovery about, how the VI can assist in that goal. 400 miles an hour, like you said, nap of the earth, flight. And not only that, you're talking some autonomous features, so now less risk to airmen that have to fly that vehicle or be on it, because you don't need a whole bunch of people. You don't need a crew of 6.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we have a novel concept for them where we can take 3 aircraft with 3 operators, non-pilot operators, and do the work of what's done with one HH-60 helicopter with a crew of 6 today, and do it 3 times faster over an area 6 times bigger. So we can retrieve the person in need of rescue 6 times over, as I said, an area 6 times bigger, and get them back to the medical attention they need within that 1 hour, golden hour window. So we think it's a pretty compelling story, and it comes from our focus on high-speed VTOL. We're the only people, that's not entirely true, but we are, I think, the most advanced, having focused on high-speed VTOL capability in this crop of novel aircraft development that's been going on over the past 10 years. And that is why we were invited to participate in the definition of this new Appworks challenge, the High-Speed VTOL Challenge. I was on one of the people working with folks from SOCOM, Special Operations Command, AFSOC, and other branches, along with a lot of commercial people, helping to define and scope what this high-speed VTOL challenge is about. And let me tell you the importance of high-speed VTOL. We were briefed that the U.S. had been losing war games, or simulations of engagements with sophisticated first-world enemies. because very early on they take out all our runways, and so they realized, the powers that be realized, we need aircraft that don't need runways. We need VTOL aircraft, and they have to be able to go fast. We need to be able to replace the current inventory of aircraft, so C-130s and helicopters, et cetera, with VTOL aircraft. And the V-22 is a great step in that direction. They like that. They'd like it to be bigger and faster. And so we think that we, with the VI, can get them a capability that they're looking for that's strategically important, but much faster than if you're starting with a clean sheet, because we've been working on this for many years already.
Well, and that's, I talked about this idea that oftentimes military technology comes back to, right, the civilian sector. And so what translates to personnel recovery is search and rescue.
Well, exactly. And this same capability that we're developing for personnel rescue would be terrific for search and rescue once somebody's been identified.
Yes.
If you're orbiting slowly looking for somebody who's down, I think a helicopter is a better choice.
Or a drone.
Or a drone, absolutely.
Well, I think they're doing amazing things with search and rescue with smaller, drones.
Yes, absolutely.
And, with all the different sensors you can attach, to even heat signatures and all of those things.
And putting out swarms of them, for the cost of, you're exactly right, Tom, and we need to start changing our mindset. That's what we're proposing with this package of 3 aircraft to replace 1 helicopter. Well, if you can replace 1 search and rescue helicopter with 30 drones, you're going to find people faster.
Absolutely, no doubt. Yeah, we had Tim Haney from Spectrobotics on here, I think it was in April, with Gary Korn, and we talked about, and I wrote an article for Drone Life, the good, drone swarms, the good, the bad, and the beautiful. Because people, they just don't appreciate all the good things. You hear swarm and you think something horrible.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the focus. By the way, Kamalo has been very active in the chat. Really appreciate you. So it says, seems like the Hawaiian Islands would be a great ground to seed your ideas and development, captive global market experience, and act as your test bed. So when you decide to do that, Peter, you're taking me with you.
Well, I don't want to make any in-flight inferences, but Kamalo does sound like it might be a Hawaiian-related name. So if you're looking to be one of our launch customers, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. So great stuff. All right, well, we're running low on time here, Peter. We could talk for hours. I love speaking with you. We obviously went for a full hour in Clubhouse, and it wasn't even enough then. So, we try to keep this one pretty tight, and I know we'll have you back. In fact, everybody out there, if you want to hear more from Peter, not only contact him directly, but come to Interdrone Live in Dallas, Texas, 10 to 12 August. Peter's going to be on a panel talking about these things. So he'll be floating around the expo floor. And not only that, we're going to have a live ultra burbinar at, we think, possibly a whiskey and axe throwing location. So what's more fun than whiskey and axe throwing? It's a great combination. So please join us. It's going to be a blast. So anyway, Peter, any closing thoughts? And I think it's kind of low against him. He's a great guest. Bring him back. We love Peter. Like I said, I could talk for days with him. There's always something interesting I'm learning. So any kind of closing comments or thoughts before we head out?
Yeah, the most important closing comments are when anyone is looking at these proposed new aircraft, understand that the aircraft doesn't matter by itself. It's meaningless by itself. You have to connect it to the service models that it's being proposed for and assess them together. It's only the service that's delivered by an aircraft at a price that results in success or failure. And I think that in advanced aero mobility, there are some nuggets. There are some real good business models. We have one of them. There are some others. But that is not yet brought to the fore. There's way too much talk about aircraft, not enough about service models and economics, and that's going to be what decides success. So when anybody in this audience is evaluating, keep that in mind. Don't ask, how fast does the aircraft go? Ask, what's the ticket price and the service? How many people can it carry? And how does that compete with the existing alternatives?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and part of that service model, like you said, and I think Scott asked about, was this infrastructure piece of it's a holistic 360 package. You cannot talk about aircraft without talking about the infrastructure and then how that whole entire service model will come together. I think if I'm thinking of a three-legged stool, I think those are the three legs.
They are. And then you have to evaluate it against what people are already doing, what they're willing to do, and be skeptical. I'll tell you, my one golden rule is time is not money. No one's going to pay you for saving time in a mass market. It's not money. Unless you're a consultant and you can charge for your travel time, time's not money. So if you see a business model that depends on accounting for some amount of saved time to justify a ticket price, just understand that business model will fail.
Again, you're throwing things out there I know people would love to keep talking to. So again, come to Interdrone, talk to Peter personally. It's going to be awesome. Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. Really appreciate you. Looking forward to seeing the great things that you continue to do to Transcend and see, how the vibe progresses. So once again, thank you. And everybody out there, thanks for chiming in. Lola, thank you. You're awesome. And like I said, this Thursday we're going to have Jason Pritchard from E-VTOL Insights here. This Thursday at 11 o'clock is Jason Pritchard, E-VTOL Insights on Drone Law Connections. So join us there on Clubhouse. And then he'll be joining us next Monday here, same time, same place. So follow me on LinkedIn. I post all this stuff up. If you can't keep track of it, I can barely